I'm always trying to find interesting new things. I'm also on the forefront of a lot of just different research. So I learn about new things that come to light. Now, what I'm going to talk about today in the world of fermented tea isn't anything new, but it's gaining popularity and a level of newness within at least the Western world. And it's something called pu'er tea, fermented tea. If you've seen my videos before, I'm kind of a tea nerd, so I'm always talking about matcha, I'm talking about green tea, black tea, all this and that. And I know those of you that are watching my channel, watch my videos, are probably at least somewhat tea connoisseurs. Like you enjoy some matcha tea when you're fasting, but your knowledge of the different teas might not extend past just the various forms of black and various forms of green. So I was really intrigued when I learned about pu'er. So I just want to talk to you about how you can introduce pu'er or fermented tea sort of into your low carb, high fat lifestyle or even into your fasting lifestyle. Hey, make sure you go ahead and hit that red subscribe button and then hit that bell icon if you haven't already. That way you can always keep it locked in here on my channel. So what pu'er tea is, or fermented tea, is tea that goes through a natural fermentation process. So it's not like kombucha. Like for example, kombucha is black tea or green tea that's been brewed, and then they add a culture to it and they ferment the tea after it's been brewed, usually adding some sugar. Kombucha is a different world. Okay, fermented tea or pu'er tea is different in the sense that it is fermented before it's brewed. So you're taking the leaves and you're fermenting them and then drying them. So the tea leaves are actually fermented already. Now, the benefit from fermented tea comes from the sense that it's already oxidized. People typically think, oh, well, a food is oxidized, so it's not going to be good for me. Like, you don't want to be eating an oxidized avocado, right? But when it comes to tea, it's a little bit different because you're oxidizing it and you're getting rid of what would potentially oxidize inside your body. Okay, so with tea, because it's oxidized and then dried, you're left with something that's really powerful. And the oxidation effect converts what are called catechins over into specific polyphenols known as theaflavins. So tea has these things called catechins. Like if you've heard of EGCG before, technically that's a catechin because the name is epigallocatechin 3-galate, right? So EGCG is a catechin. Now what happens through the fermentation process is some of these catechins, and a lot of these catechins, get converted into very potent polyphenols that normally wouldn't get converted into those polyphenols within your body. So these specific theaflavins, that we'll call them, they are really powerful at restoring gut bacteria because they're so prebiotic. So when you're fasting, but in my particular case, preferably when you're doing keto, it helps rebalance the gut bacteria because you can't constantly be eating asparagus all day, but you can sip on tea that provides you with the theaflavins that grow good bacteria. Okay, but then making matters better, you have a probiotic effect because it's fermented. Okay, so because the tea is already exposed to cultures and bacteria to ferment it in the first place, you literally get a prebiotic tea that is also probiotic. So pretty interesting. So it's a different world, right? So certain teas you're going to get antioxidant attributes, and certain teas you're going to get more digestive attributes, which have an indirect antioxidant effect. I know we're going to tea school here, and I know it's kind of weird, but honestly, tea is interesting stuff, and there's people that dedicate their whole life to this. So there's a study that was published in the journal Molecules that found that with pu'er tea, it inhibits something really interesting. It inhibits what is called Catechol-O-methyltransferase. Long word. But what it means is because it inhibits this, it inhibits the breakdown of what are called catecholamines. This means like when you're fasting or when you're doing keto and you have epinephrine or adrenaline, which are catecholamines, flowing through your body, you want that. Okay, you want those catecholamines to help you burn fat. That's the whole point. Okay, epinephrine, adrenaline, those all help you burn fat. And what happens is this Catechol-O-methyltransferase comes around and it breaks them down. It breaks down the adrenaline and it stops the effect of it. We don't want that. It turns out that pu'er tea and specific forms of the catechins in pu'er tea can inhibit this Catechol-O-methyltransferase. This is what's really cool. The reason it's so cool is because it basically is enhancing the effect of the fast by stopping the breakdown of what makes a fast or keto cool in the first place, right? Now, additionally, when you go through the fermentation process, you heighten the effects of what is called quercetin within the tea too. We have small amounts of quercetin, the antioxidant flavonoid, that are in some teas, but when it goes through a fermentation process, this gets elevated and upregulated even more. Okay, so this has two different cool things that it does in the body. For one, It's a COX-2 inhibitor, cyclooxygenase enzyme 2 inhibitor, which means that it modulates inflammation just like an aspirin or just like an ibuprofen would. But that's kind of to a small degree. I think the bigger effect is it has an antihistamine effect. So if you suffer from allergies, it can block that histamine response. So it can make it so that if you're stuffy, congested, itchy, it can actually have a positive effect by temporarily blocking that response without having to load up on a bunch of Claritin. It's pretty cool stuff. Now let's get into the really fun stuff, because this is where pu'er tea becomes somewhat superior. Now, I don't want to say that it's superior, okay? I'm not just saying that just to say it. It's superior in different ways, right? Like, you consume regular green tea or black tea, you're not going to get a big gut restorative effect, but with pu'er tea, you have a different classification of benefits, right? So there was a study that was published in the Journal of Infection and Immunity that found that due to the gut shifting effect, the gut bacteria, the gut biome shifting effect, there are some pretty powerful effects at sort of reversing metabolic damage. So in this particular study, they looked at mice that were eating a high-fat diet. Now, when I say high-fat diet, high fat and high carbs. So they were doing a lot of metabolic damage to their body, a lot of inflammation. They found that the gut remodeling that occurred because of consuming pu'er tea, so they gave the mice pu'er tea, that ended up solving and even reversing some of their metabolic dysfunction. What this implies is that in human models, it could really do a really powerful thing at reversing some of the metabolic damage and metabolic disorder effects that we've had just from eating high fat, high sugar for so long. Now, because it had powerful effects on cholesterol and because it had powerful effects overall just on high-fat diets, it does also imply that people that are eating a ketogenic diet that might fall victim to some of these other negative attributes of a high-fat diet could have some of them mitigated by consuming pu'er tea. So pretty cool stuff that's actually been published. Then we can add on to this with another study that we found in Phytotherapy research that takes a look at hormone-sensitive lipase. Hormone-sensitive lipase is the epicenter for fat burning. Okay, lipolysis has to occur at the site of hormone-sensitive lipase. And what that means is that without hormone-sensitive lipase being activated, we're never actually breaking down fat. So it's kind of cool that pu'er tea also activates this. Now, this being said, to be completely fair and play devil's advocate, green tea and black tea in general will elevate hormone-sensitive lipase, but only pu'er tea elevates hormone-sensitive lipase in conjunction with the gut remodeling. For those of you that are interested and want to try pu'er tea, I did go ahead and put a link down below to Peak Tea, so you don't have to like brew it and make it all complicated. You just have a little packets, add it to water, and you're good to go. So they've got their really cool revolutionary form of pu'er tea that's just super convenient. So I keep it in my car, I keep it at home, just like I do a lot of their other teas. It's just awesome that they're rolling this out and have this to offer now. So do check them out. Special link, special discount for anyone that watches my videos down below. You might want to try it with fasting. I highly recommend trying it with keto because it does seem to help me when it comes down to eating higher fat foods. So just check them out. Now let's go ahead and move into what it's going to do for your brain. Okay, this is a big piece. Okay, in addition to remodeling the gut bacteria, which can have a serious effect on what's called the gut-brain axis, it has a powerful effect on the glutamate scale within our body, okay, particularly our brain. So we've heard me talk in other videos, we have glutamate and we have GABA, right? So glutamate is the excitatory portion of our brain. I always use this example, so forgive me for explaining it again, but if you go out and you have food that's high in MSG, like you go to a buffet, okay, that food is going to seem like it tastes really good and you're going to want to eat a lot of it just because it seems like it tastes good, even if it doesn't really taste good. Well, that's because the MSG, monosodium glutamate, is activating the glutamate, basically, response in your brain, making your brain light up and think that you enjoy the food that you maybe didn't even really enjoy. It just enhances taste, right? Because it's lighting up your brain. Well, you can imagine how this can burn you out, right? You don't want that to constantly be lighting up your brain. That's like taking a bunch of caffeine, loading up on a bunch of caffeine. You're going to crash later. The glutamate cycle in your brain, we don't want to activate it too much. And it's a great way to kill neurons. It's a great way to instigate Alzheimer's and dementia because there's a lot of evidence pointing to that. So now we introduce the genetic side of this thing, which there's something known as mGluR5. Okay, mGluR5. We'll just call it mGluR5. So mGluR5 is sort of needs to be transcribed and it needs to be basically activated. It's a genetic pathway that will activate that glutamate cycle within the brain. So if it is activated and if it is hyperactive, it means that that side of our brain or that portion of our brain is just getting turned on all the time. What has been found is that pu'er tea downregulates and deactivates this mGluR5. So it ultimately downregulates the transcription and the translation of it. So it means that the genes that would normally turn that whole process on, A, don't get turned on very well, and B, they don't even get translated. They don't even get understood. So we could potentially be helping ourselves out, and we could go out on a limb and say that we actually could be protecting our brain, okay? We could be protecting our brain and potentially helping keep us young. So when you factor in all of the cool stuff, it's something that's worth a shot, something that you might want to add to your arsenal. Again, I'm not saying that you replace your green tea or you replace your black tea with it, but adding it into the mix and at least being educated on the different forms of tea that have been around in Eastern culture for a really long time and bringing them over to your culture and your style now could be really powerful. So as always, do keep it locked in here on my channel. I appreciate you watching. See you in the next video.